When I first met Anna, she was sitting quietly in the corner of my clinic, her hands gently folded in her lap, her eyes lowered as if she were afraid that even meeting my gaze might somehow reveal her secret. Anna is 64 years old, a retired school librarian from a small coastal town. People who knew her before would tell you she was the kind of woman who could read for hours without even noticing the sun had gone down, who never left home without a good book tucked under her arm, and who could recognize the smell of an old library from a mile away. But on that day, she looked different. Her eyes, once sharp and full of quiet curiosity, seemed clouded with something heavier than age. It all began, she told me, a few months earlier when she noticed she was struggling to read the headlines in her morning paper. At first, she blamed it on the dim kitchen light, or perhaps that she hadn't cleaned her glasses in a while. But as the weeks passed, the blur remained, and sometimes it felt like a shadow was following her gaze. She began to avoid her favorite evening walks along the beach because she found it harder to judge the uneven steps in the sand. Once, she tripped over a small rock she would have easily spotted before. It shook her deeply, though she tried not to let on to her friends or her daughter who lived in another city. Then came the moment that truly frightened her. She was in the grocery store reaching for a carton of milk when she realized she couldn't clearly see the label until it was inches from her face. In that instant, the world seemed smaller and she felt herself shrinking inside it. That night, she sat in her kitchen, the carton of milk still on the counter, and wondered if she was going blind. The thought sent a chill down her spine. By the time she came to see me, Anna was already imagining a life where she could no longer read, no longer watch the faces of her friends as they laughed, no longer see the golden sun setting behind the ocean waves she loved so much. She confessed that she had cried herself to sleep more than once, silently, because she didn't want to be a burden to her daughter. What she didn't realize yet was that her situation, while serious, was not hopeless, but it would require her to change much more than she expected. When I examined her eyes, I saw signs of early macular degeneration, one of the leading causes of vision loss in people over 50. It wasn't advanced yet, but it was enough to explain her symptoms. I asked her about her daily habits, her diet, her routines. As she spoke, I noticed a pattern that I had seen far too many times before. Breakfast was usually a slice of white bread with margarine, sometimes with a bit of jam. Lunch often involved processed meats or quick packaged meals. Dinners were light, perhaps a small bowl of pasta or some frozen fish fillets. She rarely ate fresh vegetables, and even more rarely anything like leafy greens or oily fish. Sugar was a quiet companion in her tea, and there was a small stash of cookies in the cupboard for just in case. I could see in her face that she had never thought these choices mattered much. After all, she wasn't overweight, she walked a little every day, and she didn't drink or smoke. But here was the truth she didn't yet know. The eyes are living tissue, deeply dependent on the nutrients we feed them, and just as easily harmed by the wrong foods. When those nutrients are missing or replaced by toxins from ultra-processed products, damage can happen silently, year after year, until one day the warning signs can no longer be ignored. I told Anna this gently because I knew the fear she carried. She had always thought blindness was a matter of fate or age, that it happened to some people but not others, and that she had no control over it. But I wanted her to understand that in many cases, the eyes can be protected, and sometimes even improved, if we are willing to give them what they need and take away what harms them. I explained how certain foods inflame the delicate vessels that feed the retina, how sugar spikes can quietly damage the microscopic structures in the back of the eye, and how a steady diet of artificial fats and flavor enhancers can slowly starve the optic nerve. Her eyes widened as I spoke, not in disbelief, but in recognition. She began to remember the many little habits she had never questioned, the margarine her mother used, the convenient snacks she relied on when she didn't feel like cooking, the soft drinks she enjoyed on warm afternoons. None of them seemed dangerous at the time, and yet, like small drops of water wearing away at stone, they had been quietly eroding the health of her eyes for years. But I also told her something else, something I could see brought a flicker of hope to her face. The eyes, like much of the body, have an incredible capacity to heal if given the right support. Just as they can be harmed over time, they can also be nourished back to strength. The journey would not be instant. It would require new habits, new choices, and a fresh way of thinking about food and health. But it was possible. I shared with her stories of patients who had made changes and experienced real improvements. people who had replaced processed snacks with fresh vegetables, who discovered the power of colorful fruits rich in antioxidants, who learned to love the taste of foods that strengthened the retina instead of weakening it. I described the way omega-3 fats could calm inflammation and keep the delicate eye tissues moist and flexible, how lutein and zeaxanthin could shield the macula from harmful light, and how simple hydration could keep the eyes clearer and more comfortable. Anna listened quietly, her hands now clasped around a cup of tea she had brought with her. For the first time since she had sat down, she looked directly into my eyes. I could see the question forming there. Could I really change this? And I nodded. Yes, it would take time, and it would mean looking at her daily habits with new eyes, but it was absolutely possible. Before she left that day, I gave her a simple challenge. For the next month, I asked her to try one new habit each week, something small but meaningful. Maybe it was adding a serving of leafy greens to her lunch. Maybe it was swapping margarine for a drizzle of olive oil. Maybe it was choosing a piece of fruit instead of a cookie when she wanted something sweet. And just as important, I asked her to start paying attention to how her eyes felt each day, to notice if they seemed less tired, less dry, more focused. As she walked out of my office, she paused at the door. The sunlight from outside streamed across her face, catching the faintest sparkle in her eyes. It wasn't a cure, not yet, but it was the beginning, and in that moment, I knew that Anna's story was just starting, and that perhaps, with patience and care, she would find her way back to the world she thought she was losing. Anna's mornings had always been slow and comforting, the kind she thought she had earned after decades of waking up early for work. She liked to open her kitchen window to let in the ocean breeze, set the kettle to boil, and slice a piece of white bread from the loaf she bought twice a week from the small bakery down the street. A little margarine spread thinly across it, sometimes a dab of strawberry jam, and she would sit at her table by the window, looking out over the quiet street. It was a ritual she never questioned, a small pleasure that anchored her day. But lately, as she took that first bite, she noticed something different. The newspaper on her table, once so easy to read as she sipped her tea, seemed blurry. She blinked a few times, tilted her head, and even adjusted the light, but the letters didn't sharpen. It was as if a thin fog had drifted across the page. She brushed it off at first. Maybe her glasses were smudged. Maybe she was just tired. But deep down, there was a small knot of worry forming. One Saturday morning, she invited her friend Marta over for tea. Marta was the kind of friend who noticed everything, and that day was no exception. "You've been squinting at that paper for 10 minutes, Marta said, her voice a mix of concern and curiosity. Anna laughed it off, but Marta leaned in and asked, "When was your last eye exam?" Anna hesitated. It had been years. She'd always had good vision, apart from needing glasses for reading, so she didn't see the need to go. That morning, however, Marta's question stayed with her long after she had cleared the cups and washed the dishes. It was around this time that I first met Anna in my clinic. She recounted her daily routine, mentioning her beloved bread and margarine as if it were an innocent detail. But for me, it was the first clue. I knew from years of treating patients her age that certain daily foods could quietly contribute to inflammation, affecting the delicate blood vessels that feed the eyes. Margarine, for example, contains fats that the body struggles to process, the kind that can damage circulation over time. Paired with refined bread, it was a recipe for subtle but persistent harm. When I explained this to Anna, she frowned slightly as though I had just suggested that her morning sunshine was dangerous. "But I've eaten this for years," she said. "It's just bread and a little margarine." I nodded gently. "I know, and that's what makes it tricky. It's not one big moment that causes the problem. It's the quiet, repeated choices that add up day after day." She looked away for a moment, her hands clasped in her lap. I could see she was thinking not just about breakfast, but about all the other little choices she made without a second thought. I asked her to try an experiment. For the next 2 weeks, instead of white bread and margarine, she could start her day with something nourishing for her eyes. Perhaps whole grain bread drizzled with olive oil and sprinkled with fresh herbs. Or better yet, a small bowl of oats topped with blueberries and a handful of walnuts, foods rich in antioxidants and healthy fats. I explained that these changes could help feed her retina the nutrients it craved and calm the silent inflammation that was clouding her vision. At first, Anna resisted the idea. She wasn't much of a cook, and she didn't like the thought of giving up the familiar comfort of her routine. But I could see the determination in her eyes, hidden beneath the worry. She wanted to believe she could do something to help herself. So she agreed. Just for 2 weeks, she said, almost as if making a deal with herself. The first few mornings were strange for her. She missed the soft texture of her usual bread, the easy sweetness of the jam. But she also found a quiet satisfaction in preparing her new breakfast. She sliced bananas over warm oats, tried adding a drizzle of honey, and even experimented with cinnamon. By the end of the first week, she admitted that she felt less sluggish in the mornings. It wasn't a miracle, but it was a change she could feel. One morning, while sipping her tea and eating her oats, she picked up the paper and began to read. The print still blurred sometimes, but she noticed she wasn't squinting quite as much. She didn't want to jump to conclusions. After all, vision doesn't heal overnight, but it gave her a small flicker of hope. That hope was powerful. It reminded her that maybe she did have some control over what was happening to her eyes. When she came back for her follow-up appointment, she told me about her breakfasts, the small adjustments, and the subtle shift in how she felt. "It's not perfect," she said, "but I feel lighter, more awake." I smiled. "That's your body responding. Small steps matter. Keep going." And she did. That morning ritual, once an invisible enemy, was becoming a source of healing. What Anna didn't realize then was that this was just the beginning. Breakfast was the first stone in a path that would lead her to see, quite literally, her health in a whole new light. Anna had always believed that vision loss was something that simply came with getting older. Her mother wore thick glasses in her later years, and her father often squinted at the crossword puzzle before finally giving up. "It's just age," she used to say, almost as if the thought brought comfort, as though it was part of a natural rhythm of life, nothing to fight against. That belief had allowed her to ignore the little changes in her own sight. After all, if it was inevitable, what was the point in worrying? But now, sitting across from me in my office, that comfortable belief was beginning to crack. I explained to her that while age can bring changes to vision, much of what we call age-related eye problems actually begins decades earlier, shaped by the way we live, the foods we eat, and how we care for our bodies. I told her about patients in their 70s who still drove at night without trouble, and others in their 50s who struggled to read the menu in a dim restaurant. Age wasn't the only deciding factor. Habits were. She listened quietly, her brow furrowed, her hands resting on her bag in her lap. "So you're saying it's not just about how old I am?" she asked. "It's about what I've done all these years?" I nodded. "Exactly. The eyes, like any other part of the body, respond to care. They can be nourished or neglected. And the damage we sometimes think is just age is often the result of years of silent strain." I could see she was thinking about her life in small flashes. Skipping vegetables because she lived alone and didn't feel like cooking, eating whatever was quick and easy when she was tired, relying on sweet tea to keep her company during long afternoons of reading. None of these choices felt harmful at the time. They were normal, but together they had formed the backdrop for her vision problems. To help her see the difference between natural aging and preventable decline, I shared the story of another patient, a man named Daniel, who at 70 still painted seascapes with remarkable detail. His secret wasn't luck, I told her. It was the care he had taken over the years, regular walks, a diet rich in fresh produce, plenty of omega-3 from fish, and staying engaged in hobbies that kept his eyes active and his mind sharp. "The point," I said, "is that your story isn't over. You can still change the ending." Anna leaned back slightly in her chair. "It's strange," she said softly. "I thought that when I retired, I'd just let myself relax. No more rushing, no more discipline. I thought I was giving myself a gift, but maybe I've been quietly giving up." Her voice trailed off. I waited a moment before answering. "You haven't given up. You just didn't know, and now you do. That's the difference." Over the next few weeks, Anna began to notice how many people around her spoke about their health as if it were something entirely out of their control. At her book club, one of the women mentioned she couldn't read in the evenings anymore because her eyes tired too quickly. "It's just age," she said, shrugging. At the grocery store, she overheard two men talking about how their eyesight had gone downhill since 60, but that's just how it is. She found herself wondering how many of them knew that some of it could be slowed, even reversed, if they were willing to change. It wasn't about blame, it was about possibility. She realized that if she accepted every change in her vision as just aging, she would never try to improve it, and that thought made her uneasy. One afternoon, her daughter called. They spoke about the usual things, her granddaughter's school play, a neighbor's new puppy, but then her daughter said, "Mom, I've been thinking about coming down for a visit soon. We could go to the beach together like we used to." Anna hesitated. She loved the beach, but lately she had avoided going, afraid of tripping on the uneven sand or missing a step. She didn't want her daughter to see her struggling. "I'd like that," she finally said. But after the call, she sat for a long time, realizing that she didn't want her world to keep shrinking. That evening, she took out a notebook and wrote a simple promise to herself. "I will not give up my sight without trying everything I can to protect it." It wasn't dramatic, but it felt like a turning point. She would no longer accept every change as inevitable. She would start asking, "What can I do differently?" The very next day, she began walking again, slowly at first, just around the block. She paid more attention to her food, trying to add a little color to each plate. And she started looking at her habits with new eyes. It was like waking up from a long nap. When she came back to see me a few weeks later, she told me about this shift in her thinking. I could see the difference in her posture, the brightness in her eyes. "I still have trouble reading small print," she admitted, "but I don't feel helpless anymore." "And that's worth something," I smiled. "It's worth a lot, because that feeling that you can influence your own health is what keeps people moving forward." Anna was beginning to understand that vision loss wasn't a punishment for getting older. It was a signal, one that could either be ignored or used as a reason to change. And now, for the first time in a long while, she was choosing change. By the time Anna started to take her eyesight seriously, the damage had already been quietly building for years. So quietly that she hadn't even noticed. That was the thing about the eyes. They rarely shouted for attention until the harm was already done. It was like a slow leak in a roof. You only realized there was a problem when the ceiling began to sag. And by then, the water had been dripping for far too long. I explained this to her during one of our early appointments. The eyes, I told her, are incredibly resilient, but also incredibly delicate. They can adapt to small problems for years, making tiny adjustments without you realizing. But that adaptability can be dangerous because it hides the early signs that something is wrong. When symptoms finally appear, like blurred vision, trouble seeing at night, or increased sensitivity to light, it means the underlying issue has been progressing quietly in the background. Anna thought back to moments she had brushed off. That time at the beach when she struggled to see where the wet sand ended and the water began. The evenings when she avoided driving because the headlights from oncoming cars made her squint and tense her shoulders. The way she sometimes tilted her head to catch a better view of the television. She had always told herself it was nothing, just little quirks of getting older. Now she wondered if those moments had been early whispers from her eyes, asking for help. One day, I asked her to imagine the tiny network of blood vessels inside her eyes, as thin as a strand of silk, yet responsible for delivering oxygen and nutrients to the retina. These vessels were like lifelines, keeping her vision sharp and her eyes healthy. But when diet, lifestyle, and age-related changes caused them to narrow or weaken, the flow slowed. The retina, starved of what it needed, began to struggle. Over time, microscopic damage built up, like tiny cracks in a stained glass window. Anna looked at me, her brow furrowed. "But I never felt anything," she said. "How could this have been happening without me knowing?" I told her that's exactly the danger. Silent damage is, by nature, invisible until it reaches a tipping point. The body is remarkably good at compensating, shifting its resources around to cover weak spots. But the eyes, unlike some other parts of the body, have very little room for error. Once certain cells in the retina die, they do not regenerate. That's why prevention is so critical. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said softly, "So all those years I thought I was fine." "I might not have been," I nodded gently. "You were fine in the sense that you could still see, but your eyes were slowly losing their reserves. It's like spending from a bank account without realizing your balance is getting lower and lower. One day you go to withdraw more, and there's nothing left." That metaphor stuck with her. She began to think of her eyesight as something she had to deposit into, not just draw from. Every healthy meal was a deposit. Every walk in the fresh air, every glass of water, every good night's sleep, all deposits. But every processed snack, every day she skipped her greens, every long stretch spent indoors without natural light, those were withdrawals. And she had been withdrawing for years without replenishing. One afternoon, she went to visit her friend Marta again. They sat in the kitchen drinking tea, the late sunlight pouring in through the lace curtains. Marta complained about her own eyesight, laughing it off as just another birthday gift from age. But Anna didn't laugh. She looked down at her tea and thought about the hidden work happening inside her friend's eyes, the same way it had been happening inside hers. She wondered how many people were walking around with slow, silent damage and no idea they could do something about it. Later that week, she came back to see me and told me she had been thinking about this constantly. "It's like we wait for a big warning sign," she said, "and when it comes, we act surprised. But the truth is, the little signs were there all along. We just didn't listen." She was right, and I told her so. That awareness, the ability to recognize subtle changes and take them seriously, was one of the most powerful tools she could have in protecting her sight from here on out. I gave her a simple challenge to start paying attention to her eyes the way she would listen to a friend. Notice if they felt dry after a long day at the computer. Notice if she needed to rub them more often or if certain lights bothered her. Notice if she found herself holding a book farther away or squinting more than usual. Each of these little signals was her eyes trying to tell her something. Anna accepted the challenge. She even kept a small notebook by her chair in the living room, jotting down any changes she noticed. "This morning, the sunlight looked softer than usual," she wrote one day. "Maybe I'm just imagining it." Another day, "Letters on the TV seem a little fuzzier." These notes weren't dramatic, but they were important. They helped her start connecting how her habits affected her vision. Over time, she began to notice a pattern. On days when she ate fresh, colorful meals and spent time outside walking, her eyes felt clearer and less strained. On days when she stayed indoors, ate something quick and processed, and skipped her walk, her eyes seemed heavier, slower to focus. It was subtle, but once she saw the pattern, she couldn't unsee it. That was the power of understanding silent damage. Once you knew it was possible, you could no longer ignore the little whispers. You learned to catch them before they turned into shouts. And for Anna, that realization was the beginning of a deeper commitment, not just to her eyes, but to herself. She wasn't just reacting anymore, she was watching, she was listening, and that, I knew, could make all the difference. Anna had always thought she ate reasonably well. She wasn't one for fast food chains, and she cooked at home most days. To her, unhealthy food meant greasy burgers wrapped in paper or giant buckets of fried chicken, things she rarely touched. But as we sat together and went over what she actually ate, a different picture began to form. Her mornings were still usually bread with something quick to spread. Lunch might be a toasted cheese sandwich or instant noodles. "Just to keep me going until dinner," she said. Dinner itself was often simple. Pasta with jarred sauce, breaded frozen fish, or a slice of quiche from the bakery. She kept biscuits in the cupboard for when she felt like something sweet. And every now and then, she enjoyed a fizzy drink in the afternoon. None of it felt dangerous to her. These were normal foods, the same things she'd been eating for decades. That was exactly the problem. I explained that many of the most harmful foods for our eyes aren't the obvious culprits we imagine. It's not always the fried street food or the triple cheeseburger. Often it's the quiet, everyday products we've grown so used to that we no longer notice them. Packaged bread, for example, can be full of refined flour and hidden sugars that spike blood sugar and quietly harm the delicate vessels in the retina. Margarine and certain spreads contain trans fats, which trigger inflammation and disrupt the microcirculation that nourishes the eyes. Even those innocent biscuits and sweetened teas added to the cumulative load on her system. Anna looked at me, puzzled. "But these are just groceries, things I've always bought." I nodded. "That's what makes them so tricky. They don't come with a warning label saying they could steal your sight. They look harmless. They taste familiar. And they're easy. But over time, they can do more harm than you think." I could see her thinking of her kitchen, the shelves, the fridge, the freezer. She had always prided herself on keeping a well-stocked pantry, but now she began to wonder how much of it was actually nourishing her body and how much of it was quietly robbing her of health. I told her a story about another patient, a man named Paolo who used to start every day with coffee and a slice of toast topped with margarine. He thought nothing of it. It was quick and cheap. But after years of these habits, he developed severe macular degeneration. When he finally changed his breakfast to whole grain bread with avocado or fresh fruit with yogurt, his energy improved, and while his vision loss couldn't be reversed, it stopped getting worse. Anna listened carefully. "So you're saying even the things that feel safe might not be?" I smiled gently. "Especially the things that feel safe, because we don't question them. And when we don't question them, We keep eating them for years without realizing what they're doing, she sighed. But what about the convenience? I don't have the energy to cook big meals all the time. I reassured her that it didn't have to be complicated. Sometimes the healthiest changes are the simplest. Swapping margarine for olive oil, choosing oats instead of sugary cereal, eating a boiled egg with some fresh tomato instead of a pastry. These changes might seem small, but they add up like coins in a jar. That weekend, Anna decided to really look at her kitchen through new eyes. She took every packaged food out of her pantry and read the labels. She was shocked to see how many had sugar in the first few ingredients. Even her favorite whole grain crackers were loaded with refined flour and palm oil. The jarred pasta sauce she loved was sweetened. The frozen fish fillets had a long list of additives she didn't recognize. She felt a little betrayed. All these years, I thought I was doing fine, she told me at our next appointment. But I've been feeding myself things that don't help me at all. I told her it wasn't about blame, it was about awareness. Now that she could see the hidden danger, she could choose differently. Anna decided to make a few swaps right away. She replaced her margarine with extra virgin olive oil. She traded her white bread for true whole grain bread from the small organic bakery in town. She kept fresh fruit on the counter, so it was the first thing she reached for when she wanted something sweet. And she tried cooking simple meals in batches, soups with carrots and leafy greens, grilled fish with lemon, roasted vegetables she could reheat for lunch. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. She noticed that after a few weeks of these changes, her energy was steadier. She didn't feel as sluggish in the afternoons, and she found herself reaching for biscuits less often. Most importantly, she felt in control. One afternoon, while she was cutting carrots for soup, she caught herself smiling. It wasn't that her vision had suddenly sharpened, it was still a work in progress. But she felt lighter knowing she was finally feeding her body in a way that made sense. And for Anna, that was just as important as any prescription. I reminded her often, protecting your eyes isn't about never enjoying food again. It's about making sure the everyday things you eat are working for you, not against you. And now, every time Anna poured olive oil over her salad instead of spreading margarine on bread, she felt like she was quietly choosing her own future. When I first told Anna she had the early stages of macular degeneration, she didn't know what to say. The name alone sounded heavy, almost menacing. She repeated the words slowly, tasting them as if trying to understand them by sound alone. Macular degeneration, she said. What does that even mean? I explained that the macula is a small but crucial part of the retina, located right at the center. It's responsible for sharp, detailed vision, the kind you use when you read, recognize faces, or thread a needle. Without a healthy macula, you can still see, but the center of your vision becomes blurred or dark, and no amount of glasses can fix it. It's like having a camera with a damaged lens. No matter how much you adjust the focus, the picture will never be sharp again. Anna listened, her lips pressed together. So this is the thing that's been stealing my sight? I nodded. Yes. And it's called the silent thief because it works slowly and quietly, often without obvious symptoms in the beginning. By the time most people notice, it's already done quite a bit of damage. She leaned back in her chair, her hands resting on her lap. But I can still see well enough now. Does that mean I have time? I smiled gently. Yes, you have time. And that's the good news, but time is only useful if we use it well. The changes you've already started making, your breakfast, your cooking, the way you're paying attention to labels, these are exactly the kind of steps that can slow this thief down. The truth was, Anna's case wasn't unusual. I had seen dozens of patients with similar patterns. Years of diets low in antioxidants and high in processed fats, combined with too much sugar and not enough fresh vegetables. All of it created a slow-burning inflammation in the tiny vessels of the eye. The macula, delicate and hungry for nutrients, struggled quietly until one day it could no longer keep up. Anna wanted to know exactly what would happen if the condition worsened. I told her that in advanced stages, people with macular degeneration often lose the ability to see faces clearly. Reading becomes difficult, then impossible. They may still be able to navigate a room by peripheral vision, but the center of their world becomes a blur. For someone like Anna, who had spent her life reading books, studying details, and watching the world closely, this was no small loss. She sat silently for a moment, her eyes fixed on the patterned rug beneath her feet. I don't want to lose faces, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to lose my books. That was the turning point, the moment when trying became committing. From that day forward, Anna began approaching her diet and daily habits as if she were guarding something priceless, because she was. We talked about the nutrients that could help protect her macula: lutein and zeaxanthin from leafy greens, antioxidants from colorful fruits, omega-3 fats from fish and nuts. I told her about studies showing how these nutrients could help slow the progression of the disease, especially when combined with healthy lifestyle habits like regular exercise and blood sugar control. Anna took it all in. She even brought a small notebook to her next visit, filled with handwritten notes and questions. Can I get lutein from spinach if I cook it? She asked. How often should I eat salmon? Is it okay to have blueberries every day? I answered each question, but what struck me most was her determination. She wasn't just listening anymore, she was learning, planning, and acting. At home, she began building her meals around foods that would feed her eyes. Breakfast might be oatmeal topped with blueberries and walnuts. Lunch was often a spinach salad with boiled eggs and a drizzle of olive oil. Dinner became a simple piece of grilled salmon with roasted carrots and sweet potatoes. She didn't stop enjoying food, she simply shifted her focus from convenience to nourishment. One Saturday morning, her daughter came to visit. They sat at the kitchen table, sharing tea and fresh fruit. Her daughter looked at her plate and smiled. You've really changed how you eat, she said. Anna laughed softly. I have to. I'm fighting a thief. They decided to go for a walk by the beach, something Anna had been avoiding for months. The uneven sand still made her a little nervous, but she walked slowly, keeping her eyes on the patterns of light on the water. She noticed the way the sun caught the edges of the waves, the tiny glints that danced and disappeared. She told me later that she felt like she was memorizing those details, storing them away like treasures. Just in case, she said, but also because I don't want to take them for granted anymore. That was another thing macular degeneration had given her, an awareness of the present moment. Every detail of the world felt more precious now. She paid attention to the colors of flowers, the way her granddaughter's smile lit up her whole face, the soft shift of evening light across her living room wall. She was looking more closely than she had in years. At her next appointment, we compared her latest eye scans to the ones from before. The changes were subtle, but the important thing was this: the progression had slowed, her eyes were holding steady. For someone with macular degeneration, that was a victory. Anna beamed when I told her. So it's working? She asked. Yes, I said. You're holding the thief at bay. She left my office that day walking a little taller. She knew the fight wasn't over, but she also knew she wasn't powerless. And every time she chose spinach over biscuits or salmon over processed fish sticks, she was choosing to keep seeing the world she loved for as long as she could. Anna never thought of herself as someone who ate a lot of sugar. She didn't put spoonfuls into her tea anymore, and she rarely bought chocolate. To her, having a sweet tooth meant eating dessert every day, something she certainly didn't do. So when I asked her about her sugar intake, she smiled confidently. Oh, I don't have much, she said. But as we started going through her daily meals, the truth began to surface. That slice of bread in the morning, sweetened, the jam she sometimes spread on top, packed with sugar, the biscuits she kept just for guests. She admitted to having a few herself in the evenings. Even the jarred pasta sauce she used for dinner, sweetened, and the occasional fizzy drink on a warm afternoon, more sugar than she realized. I explained to Anna that sugar is sneaky. It hides in everyday foods, especially processed ones, and it doesn't take much for the total to add up. The danger for her eyes was real. When blood sugar spikes repeatedly, it damages the tiny, delicate vessels that feed the retina. Over time, this can lead to a condition called diabetic retinopathy, even in people who don't have diabetes yet. In fact, many people only discover they have blood sugar issues when their vision starts to change. She sat back in her chair, frowning. But I've never had diabetes, she said. I nodded. That's good. But sugar can still harm your eyes long before diabetes shows up in a blood test. The retina is especially sensitive to inflammation caused by high glucose. It's like pouring syrup into a fine watch mechanism. Everything starts to stick, slow down, and wear out. Anna thought about the times she had felt her energy crash in the afternoons. She had always blamed it on getting older, but now she wondered if it was those biscuits, that sweetened tea, or the hidden sugar in her dinner sauces. I never realized it could be connected to my eyes, she said softly. I could tell she was thinking back to her mother, who had developed severe vision problems late in life. Anna remembered how her mother used to squint at her knitting, holding it closer and closer until she finally had to give it up. No one had ever connected her mother's diet to her eyesight, but Anna began to wonder if perhaps it wasn't just bad luck or age after all. We talked about the kinds of changes that could help protect her retina from sugar damage. The goal wasn't to remove every trace of sweetness from her life, it was to replace refined sugars with natural, nutrient-rich sources and keep her blood sugar stable throughout the day. I suggested swapping her jam for mashed fresh berries, her sweetened sauces for homemade tomato blends, and her biscuits for a small handful of nuts or a slice of fresh fruit. Anna agreed to try, though I could see the hesitation in her eyes. Sugar, even in small amounts, had been a quiet comfort in her life. It wasn't just about taste, it was about habit. The little biscuit with tea in the evening felt like a reward after a quiet day. But she was determined now, and determination is a powerful thing. That week, she made a trip to the local market. She bought fresh strawberries, blueberries, and apples. She found a baker who made whole grain bread without added sugar. She picked up jars of pure peanut butter and olive oil for cooking. At home, she set the biscuits aside and filled a small glass jar with mixed nuts, keeping it where the biscuits used to be. The first few evenings without her sweet treat felt strange. She told me later that she would make her tea and instinctively reach for the biscuit tin, only to find her hand hovering in midair. Instead, she would take a few nuts or a slice of apple. At first, it didn't feel quite as satisfying, but after a week, she noticed something surprising. Her energy stayed steadier in the afternoons, and her eyes felt less strained by evening. One morning, she sliced strawberries onto her oatmeal instead of sprinkling sugar. The sweetness was gentler, fresher, and she realized she liked it better. She also noticed that her tea tasted just fine without added sugar once she stopped expecting it to be sweet. It was as if her taste buds were waking up from a long nap. A few weeks later, Anna came into my office with a small smile. "I think I've broken up with sugar," she said. "We're still friends, but we don't see each other every day anymore." I laughed, but I knew exactly what she meant. She wasn't cutting out sweetness entirely, she was reclaiming control over it, and that control was already paying off. I reminded her that keeping her blood sugar steady was one of the most important things she could do for her eyes. Every time she chose fruit over a biscuit, every time she made her own sauce instead of opening a jar, she was protecting those fragile vessels in her retina. It wasn't a flashy change, but it was one of the most powerful. Anna told me she had started reading labels obsessively, not just for sugar, but for other hidden additives. "It's like I've got new eyes in the supermarket," she said. "I see things I never noticed before." That awareness had spilled over into other parts of her life too. She was more conscious of how she felt after eating certain foods, more alert to the signals her body sent her. One evening, her daughter called, and they talked about baking together the next time she visited. Anna suggested they make something new: oatmeal cookies sweetened with mashed bananas and a little honey. "I want to show her," Anna said to me later, "that you can still have something sweet without hurting yourself." It wasn't just about her own health anymore. It was about setting an example for the people she loved. Sugar, Anna realized, had been like a soft, friendly shadow in her life, never demanding attention, never causing obvious harm, but always there. And like a shadow, it was easy to forget it was following her everywhere. Now she had turned to face it directly, and in doing so, she had taken away its quiet power. Her eyes weren't magically healed, but she felt lighter, clearer, and more in control. And for Anna, that was worth more than any biscuit. It was during one of our follow-up conversations that I asked Anna about how she flavored her food. She told me she liked her cooking to have a lot of taste. "I don't want to eat something that tastes like cardboard," she laughed. So she used ready-made seasoning packets, powdered soup bases, and sometimes small cubes of concentrated broth. "They make everything taste better," she said. I nodded, knowing exactly what that meant. Monosodium glutamate, or MSG. It's a flavor enhancer found in countless packaged seasonings, instant noodles, canned soups, and processed meats. It gives food that rich, savory, umami taste people love. But for some people, especially those with sensitive nervous systems, it can be a hidden risk. I explained gently that while MSG is generally recognized as safe in small amounts, There's ongoing research into how it might affect the optic nerve in certain individuals. The optic nerve is the delicate cable that carries visual information from the eye to the brain. If that cable becomes damaged, even slightly, the brain may not receive clear images. It's like a frayed wire transmitting fuzzy signals. Some studies have suggested that high or prolonged exposure to MSG could interfere with nerve signaling, potentially contributing to optic nerve stress or damage. Anna's eyes widened. "You mean the stuff in my soup packets could be hurting my eyes?" she asked. I could see a mixture of disbelief and concern in her face. "It's not that one spoonful will blind you," I reassured her. "The issue is that you've been using it regularly for years without even realizing how much you're consuming. It's the slow, repeated exposure that can be risky, especially if your eyes are already vulnerable." She thought for a moment, then said, "But I've been cooking like this forever. My mother used those broth cubes. We always had them in the house." That was exactly the point. MSG wasn't something she consciously chose. It was just part of her cooking culture. It hid in her food the way sugar once had, quietly making its way into meals every day. I suggested she try an experiment. For the next few weeks, she could cook without her usual seasoning packets or broth cubes, using fresh herbs, garlic, onions, and natural spices instead. She could still have flavor, just not from a chemical shortcut. I offered her simple combinations: rosemary and lemon for chicken, turmeric and cumin for vegetables, fresh basil for pasta. Anna hesitated. "It won't taste the same," she said. I smiled. "It won't. It'll taste better, but your tongue might need a little time to remember what real food tastes like." The first few days were awkward. She told me later that she felt like her food was missing something, but she kept going, determined to see if it made a difference. She experimented with herbs she hadn't used in years. She roasted garlic until it turned sweet and soft, sprinkled smoked paprika over vegetables, added fresh parsley to her soups. Slowly, her cooking began to develop new layers of flavor, different from the instant umami kick of MSG, but deeper and more satisfying. 2 weeks in, she noticed something surprising. She no longer had the mild headaches that sometimes came after dinner. She hadn't realized they might be connected to her seasoning until they quietly disappeared. She also noticed her eyes felt less strained at the end of the day, though she wasn't sure if it was coincidence. When she came to see me, she was almost proud. "I haven't touched my broth cubes in a month," she said. "I thought I couldn't live without them, but I'm doing just fine." She described how she'd started keeping jars of dried oregano, thyme, and marjoram in a basket by her stove, alongside fresh ginger and garlic. "I feel like I'm cooking like my grandmother again, before all these packets existed." I told her this wasn't just about removing a potential irritant to her optic nerve. It was also about reclaiming control over what went into her body. The more she prepared her food from real ingredients, the less she relied on factory-made shortcuts. Every meal became another way of protecting her vision. One evening, Anna invited her friend Marta over for dinner. Marta had always loved Anna's hearty soups, so Anna decided to make one without MSG for the first time in years. She used fresh chicken, carrots, celery, onions, and a bouquet of fresh herbs tied together with string. As the pot simmered, the whole kitchen filled with a rich, comforting aroma. When they finally sat down to eat, Marta took a spoonful and paused. "This tastes different," she said. Anna braced herself. "Different how?" Marta smiled. "Better, softer, like real food." That night, after her friend had gone home, Anna sat at her kitchen table with a quiet sense of victory. She had thought giving up MSG would make her meals dull. Instead, it had reconnected her to flavors she hadn't tasted in years. She realized that sometimes the extra we think we need is actually just covering up what's naturally good. From then on, MSG wasn't part of her cooking anymore. She didn't need it. And in its place, she gained something much more valuable. Not just better flavor, but another layer of confidence that she could make changes, even to habits she thought were unshakable. Her optic nerve wasn't something she could see or touch, but she knew it was there, working every second of every day to connect her eyes to her mind. Now, every time she cooked without those packets, she thought of it as a small act of protection, like locking the door against that silent thief trying to sneak into her vision. Anna had always thought breakfast was her safest meal of the day. Compared to dinner parties, cafe lunches, or takeaway treats, her mornings seemed simple and wholesome. A slice or two of bread, a spread of something she liked, and a hot drink to start the day. How could something so ordinary, so familiar, possibly be harmful? But one morning, after she'd been making changes to her cooking and seasoning for a few months, she looked at her breakfast with fresh eyes. The bread was soft, white, and airy. She could almost crumble it between her fingers without effort. The margarine she spread over it came from the same brand her mother had bought for decades. Sometimes she added a small spoon of jam. For brightness, she would say. It was comfort on a plate. That day, she remembered a conversation we had during one of her first visits. I'd told her that refined carbs and processed fats, the kind often found in white bread and margarine, could quietly strain the eyes by driving inflammation, reducing circulation, and depriving the retina of steady nutrients. Back then, she'd nodded politely, but the thought had been buried under so many other changes she was trying to make. Now, with all she'd learned about hidden sugars and MSG, she saw her breakfast in a different light. When she came to see me that week, she mentioned it almost shyly. "Do you think my breakfast could be part of the problem?" I smiled gently. "Yes. In fact, for many people, breakfast is the first place to look when trying to protect vision. What we eat in the morning sets the tone for our blood sugar, circulation, and nutrient supply for the whole day." I explained that white bread acts a lot like sugar once it's in the body. It breaks down quickly, spiking blood glucose and triggering inflammation. Margarine, especially the older formulation she'd grown up with, contains processed fats that can harm tiny blood vessels over time. And the jam? A burst of sweetness without much nutrition. In short, her comforting breakfast was a perfect recipe for fueling inflammation in the very tissues she was trying to heal. Anna frowned. "But I've eaten this for years. I thought I was doing fine." I nodded. "That's the tricky part. It doesn't hurt right away. It works slowly, quietly, almost politely, until one day you notice the blur." She went home determined to try something new. She decided to see if she could build a breakfast that was just as comforting but more nourishing for her eyes. She started with oatmeal, something she hadn't eaten since her daughter was small. She simmered it gently on the stove, stirred in cinnamon, and topped it with fresh blueberries and a sprinkle of walnuts. She drizzled in a little honey for sweetness. The first morning, she missed the easy slice of bread, but she also felt strangely proud of herself for trying. By the third day, the oatmeal had become a small ritual. She found comfort in stirring the pot and seeing the colors of berries against the creamy oats. She felt fuller for longer and didn't get that mid-morning slump she'd always thought was just part of being in her 60s. She began to understand that breakfast wasn't just about filling the stomach, it was about setting her body up for a day of steady energy and stable blood sugar. One morning, her friend Marta dropped by unexpectedly. Marta had always teased Anna about her health changes, calling her the scientist for how carefully she now read labels and planned meals. But when Anna offered her a bowl of oatmeal with berries and walnuts, Marta hesitated, then took a spoonful. "This is good," she admitted. "I thought healthy meant boring." Anna laughed. "So did I. Turns out I was wrong." A few weeks later, Anna came in for her regular check-in. She told me she hadn't had her old bread and margarine breakfast in over a month. "I don't even miss it," she said. "I think it was just habit, not love." She noticed her mornings felt lighter, no sluggish heaviness after eating, no racing to the kitchen for a snack before lunch. Most importantly, she felt she was giving her eyes the best possible start each day. We talked about why this mattered. Every morning, the eyes need a steady supply of antioxidants and anti-inflammatory nutrients to repair the minor wear and tear from the day before. A breakfast rich in whole grains, healthy fats, and vitamins supports that repair. A breakfast of refined carbs and processed fats, on the other hand, forces the body to fight inflammation before it can even begin to heal. Anna nodded thoughtfully. "So breakfast is kind of like my first defense of the day?" "Exactly," I said. "Think of it as charging your vision battery every morning." Her transformation wasn't just about the food, it was about the awareness, seeing the hidden patterns that had been quietly shaping her health for decades. The simple act of changing her breakfast became a symbol for her entire journey, taking something familiar and replacing it with something better, without losing the comfort she loved. One sunny morning, as she sat at her kitchen table with her bowl of oatmeal, she noticed the way the light fell through the lace curtains, scattering tiny patterns across the tabletop. She leaned forward, studying the delicate shadows, almost as if memorizing them. In that quiet moment, she realized she had begun to trust her eyes again, not because they were perfect, but because she was finally giving them a chance. It was a breezy afternoon when Anna first realized she could no longer pretend everything was fine. She had gone to the small grocery store in town, as she often did on Thursdays, to pick up a few things for the weekend. The sunlight outside was bright, but inside the store, the lighting was dim and uneven, the kind that made everything feel just a little hazy. Anna walked down the aisle toward the dairy section, scanning the shelves for her usual carton of milk. She reached for one, then paused. The label looked fuzzy. She squinted, leaned closer, but the letters didn't sharpen. She moved the carton nearer to her face until she could finally read it. In that moment, she felt a quiet panic rise in her chest. It wasn't the first time her vision had faltered, but it was the first time she couldn't explain it away. It wasn't the wrong glasses, it wasn't bad lighting, it wasn't tiredness. This was something deeper, and it was happening even on an ordinary afternoon in the middle of an ordinary errand. When she got home, she sat at her kitchen table and placed the milk carton in front of her. She stared at the words on the label, willing them to come into focus. They did, but not as quickly or as clearly as she remembered. She felt a lump in her throat. What if this kept getting worse? What if there came a day when she couldn't read her own shopping list, or her granddaughter's letters, or the recipe cards her mother had written by hand decades ago? That evening, Anna called her daughter. She didn't mention the milk carton or the panic she'd felt, but she asked how everyone was doing and listened as her daughter chatted about the week. All the while, Anna's mind kept drifting back to that moment in the store. She couldn't shake the feeling that her world had shifted, subtly but unmistakably. At her next appointment, I noticed a seriousness in her voice that hadn't been there before. She told me about the grocery store, the label she couldn't read, the way the letters seemed to swim. "I thought I had more time," she said quietly, "but maybe I don't." I listened carefully before answering. "Anna, what you're feeling now, that urgency, is actually a good thing. It means you're listening to your body. And the truth is, these warning signs aren't the end of the story. They're the beginning of you fighting for your vision with everything you've got." I reminded her that the changes she had already made, reducing sugar, cutting out MSG, swapping her breakfast, using fresh ingredients, were giving her eyes the best chance possible. But there was still more she could do. The difference between losing ground quickly and holding steady often comes down to catching these signs early and acting on them, I said. She nodded slowly. "So this is my moment to push harder?" I smiled. "Exactly." Over the next few weeks, Anna doubled down on her efforts. She paid even closer attention to her meals, filling her plate with colorful vegetables and fresh fish twice a week. She kept a bottle of water by her chair to stay hydrated, knowing that even mild dehydration could make her eyes feel dry and strained. She walked every afternoon, not just for her legs or her heart, but because she understood now that exercise was also feeding her eyes with oxygen-rich blood. One evening, she was reading a book when she noticed the print start to blur slightly. Instead of pushing through it, she set the book down, closed her eyes for a few moments, and took a slow walk around her garden. When she returned, her eyes felt less tense, and the letters looked sharper again. It was a small victory, but it reminded her that she wasn't powerless. She could respond, she could adjust, she could give her eyes what they needed. Still, the memory of that grocery store moment stayed with her. It was like a quiet bell ringing in the background of her days. It reminded her to be alert, to stay committed, to never again assume that her vision would take care of itself. One Saturday, her granddaughter came to visit. They sat at the kitchen table drawing together. The little girl handed Anna a bright purple crayon and said, "Grandma, draw the sun." Anna laughed and began to sketch, but halfway through she stopped. She looked at the simple lines and colors on the paper, and a wave of gratitude washed over her. She could see them, she could still see them, and she was going to do everything in her power to keep it that way. At her next checkup, she told me, "I used to think warning signs meant the damage was already done. Now I think they're invitations, a chance to do something before it's too late." She was right, and I could see in her eyes, clear, steady, and determined, that she was ready to take that invitation seriously. The milk carton moment had been a scare, yes, but it had also been a gift, a line in the sand where Anna decided once and for all that her vision was worth fighting for every single day. After the milk carton scare, Anna became more determined than ever to nourish her eyes instead of just avoiding harm. She had already learned what to cut out: sugar, MSG, processed fats. But now she wanted to know exactly what she could add to her diet to help her vision not only survive, but thrive. When she came into my office one breezy morning, she carried a small notebook, the kind she now used for jotting down recipes, grocery lists, and questions for me. She opened it, and in her neat handwriting, I saw a simple title: Foods for My Eyes. Beneath it, she had written a short list: spinach, salmon, eggs, blueberries. She looked up at me and smiled shyly. "I've been doing my homework." I explained to her that while avoiding harmful foods was like locking the door to keep thieves out, eating nutrient-rich foods was like inviting in skilled repairmen to strengthen the walls. Each nutrient worked in its own way to protect the delicate structures of the eye. Lutein and zeaxanthin from leafy greens to shield the macula, omega-3 fatty acids from fish to reduce inflammation and improve circulation, vitamin C from fruits to fight oxidative stress, and zinc from seeds and legumes to support the retina's function. Anna's eyes lit up when I told her that many of these foods were colorful and flavorful. "So it's not going to be a plate of beige?" she asked. I laughed. "No. Think of your plate as a painter's palette. The more natural colors, the better for your eyes." She decided to make her kitchen a little laboratory of vision care. That week, she bought a bundle of fresh spinach, a large fillet of salmon, a dozen eggs, a punnet of blueberries, and a bag of raw walnuts. She rearranged her refrigerator so these foods were front and center, easy to see and reach. The biscuits and processed snacks she'd once kept on the middle shelf were gone, replaced by small glass jars of seeds and nuts. Her first experiment was a spinach and egg omelet for breakfast. She sautéed the greens gently until they wilted, poured in beaten eggs, and let the edges turn golden before folding it in half. She sprinkled a few fresh herbs on top and took her first bite. The flavor was bright and earthy, a far cry from her old bread and margarine routine. She felt proud of herself, and even prouder when she realized she was feeding her macula with every forkful. For lunch, she tried a salad of spinach, avocado, and blueberries, drizzled with olive oil and sprinkled with crushed walnuts. The colors alone made her smile. "It feels like I'm eating something alive," she told me later, "something that wants me to be healthy." Dinner became her time to enjoy fish. Twice a week, she grilled salmon with a squeeze of lemon and a dusting of black pepper. On other days, she tried sardines on whole grain toast or a simple vegetable soup with lentils for zinc and protein. She noticed that these meals left her feeling light but satisfied, and she no longer craved the heavy, starchy dinners that used to leave her sluggish. Anna began to look forward to grocery shopping in a way she hadn't in years. The produce section felt like a treasure hunt, each colorful fruit and leafy vegetable a potential ally in her fight for vision. She started chatting with the greengrocer, asking when the freshest spinach arrived or whether the blueberries were from a local farm. She found joy in choosing her food, knowing every choice was a small investment in her eyesight. One afternoon, her granddaughter visited and asked for a snack. Instead of offering biscuits, Anna sliced up an apple and handed her a small bowl of blueberries. The little girl popped one into her mouth and grinned. "Sweet," she said. Anna laughed. "And good for your eyes." She was quietly proud that she could pass on these habits to someone so young, sparing her the years of hidden harm that Anna herself had endured. After a month of eating this way, Anna noticed changes. She still had the occasional blurry moment. Macular degeneration was not something that disappeared overnight, but her eyes felt less dry and she had fewer headaches in the evenings. She felt more focused when reading, and her energy throughout the day was steadier. When she came in for her next appointment, she told me, "It's strange. I feel like my meals are now a kind of medicine, but they don't taste like medicine. They taste like real food." I told her that was exactly the point. True nutrition doesn't feel like a punishment. It feels like living. We talked about how to keep variety in her meals so she wouldn't get bored. She started adding pumpkin seeds to her salads, trying roasted sweet potatoes as a side dish, and making smoothies with spinach, banana, and blueberries. She even began experimenting with herbs and spices she'd never used before. Turmeric for its anti-inflammatory benefits, parsley for a burst of freshness, cinnamon for natural sweetness without sugar. As she embraced these foods, Anna began to feel a quiet shift inside her. She wasn't just avoiding blindness anymore. She was building a life where her vision was supported and valued every day. Each colorful plate felt like a promise to herself. "I will do everything I can to keep seeing the world I love." One evening, as she stood at her kitchen counter slicing carrots for a soup, she paused to look out the window. The sky was streaked with pink and orange, the sun dipping low over the water. She took a moment to really see it, to drink in the colors, the shapes, the changing light. She thought of all the mornings, afternoons, and evenings still ahead, and of how much she wanted to keep seeing them. Then she smiled, stirred her soup, and carried on. The first time I mentioned carrots to Anna, she smiled politely, the way someone does when they think they've just heard the most obvious advice in the world. "Carrots," she repeated. "Of course. My mother used to tell me that all the time." She chuckled softly. "I thought that was just an old wives' tale." I told her there was more truth to it than she might realize. Carrots are rich in beta-carotene, a compound the body converts into vitamin A, a nutrient that plays a critical role in keeping the retina healthy. Without enough vitamin A, the light-sensitive cells in the retina, called photoreceptors, struggle to function. This can lead to difficulty seeing in low light, slower adjustment from bright to dark environments, and, over time, damage to overall vision. Anna tilted her head thoughtfully. "So when my mother told me to eat my carrots, she was actually giving me medical advice?" I smiled. "She was, and she probably didn't even know the full science behind it." The next week, Anna went to the local market and picked out a bundle of fresh carrots, their leafy green tops still attached. She hadn't bought whole carrots in years. She usually grabbed the pre-cut sticks in plastic bags. But something about the fresh bunch felt more alive, more real. She took them home, washed them carefully, and stood in her kitchen holding one in her hand. It felt like a small but powerful act, choosing something not because it was convenient, but because it was good for her. At first, she sliced them into thin sticks and kept them in a glass container in the fridge. Whenever she wanted a snack, she'd grab a few. The crunch was satisfying, and she liked that they didn't give her the heavy feeling she sometimes got from bread or crackers. On warmer days, she'd shred them into salads with lemon juice and olive oil. On cooler evenings, she roasted them in the oven with a drizzle of honey and a sprinkle of thyme until they were tender and sweet. After a few weeks, eating carrots stopped feeling like a chore and started feeling like a treat. She began to notice small changes, not miracles, but subtle improvements. Reading in the early evening felt a bit easier. Adjusting to the dim light when she walked into her living room at night seemed quicker. And most importantly, she felt good knowing she was feeding her eyes what they needed to function well. One afternoon, her granddaughter came over after school. Anna served her a plate of carrot sticks with a small bowl of hummus. The little girl dipped one, took a bite, and grinned. "Sweet," she said. Anna laughed. "Nature's candy," she replied. In that moment, she realized she was passing on something more than a snack. She was passing on a habit that might help her granddaughter's vision for years to come. At her next appointment, she told me about her carrot habit. I explained that in addition to beta-carotene, carrots also contain antioxidants that help fight oxidative stress in the eyes. Oxidative stress is like a slow rusting process inside the body. It happens naturally over time, but it can speed up with poor diet, pollution, and certain health conditions. By eating foods rich in antioxidants, Anna was helping her eyes defend themselves against that slow, silent wear. We also talked about how carrots work best when combined with healthy fats, since beta-carotene is fat-soluble. That meant adding a little olive oil to roasted carrots or pairing raw carrot sticks with hummus or avocado could help her body absorb the nutrient more effectively. Anna loved the idea. "So my carrots and olive oil are actually a team?" she said, smiling. "Exactly," I replied. Over the following months, carrots became a permanent fixture in her kitchen. She experimented with carrot soup blended with ginger, carrot and apple salad with a light vinaigrette, even carrot muffins sweetened with mashed banana instead of sugar. She found joy in discovering new ways to prepare them, and the vibrant orange color on her plate became a daily reminder that she was actively caring for her eyes. One day, while peeling a carrot for her lunch, she paused to look out the window. The late afternoon sun was filtering through the leaves, casting warm gold patches on the garden wall. She stood there for a moment, soaking in the colors, the clarity, the subtle details of shadow and light. She thought about how easy it would have been to keep eating the way she used to, ignoring the quiet damage, believing her vision loss was inevitable. But now, every bite of those sweet, crunchy carrots felt like a choice for a different future. It wasn't about believing that carrots alone could save her sight. It was about understanding that every small choice added up, that her vision was worth fighting for in all the little ways she could manage. And that, she realized, was the true gift her mother had given her all those years ago when she told her to eat her carrots. Not just a piece of health advice, but the reminder that caring for yourself is something you do every single day, one bite at a time. Anna had been feeling good about her new carrot habit when I decided it was time to introduce her to two other powerful allies for her eyes, lutein and zeaxanthin. Unlike beta-carotene, these weren't names she recognized. She looked at me curiously when I mentioned them. Lutein and, what was the other one? She asked, tilting her head as if she was trying to memorize the words. Zeaxanthin, I repeated slowly, two nutrients that love your eyes almost as much as you do. I explained that lutein and zeaxanthin are carotenoids, plant pigments that give certain foods their vibrant yellow and green colors. More importantly, they concentrate in the macula, the central part of the retina responsible for sharp, detailed vision. Once there, they act like natural sunglasses, filtering harmful, high-energy blue light and protecting the eye's delicate cells from oxidative stress. In simple terms, they help the macula stay strong and clear. Anna leaned back in her chair, her brow furrowed. So, they're like bodyguards for the part of my eye that's already under attack? I smiled. Exactly. And the good news is, they're found in foods you can easily add to your meals. I told her the richest sources were dark, leafy greens like spinach, kale, and collard greens, as well as bright vegetables like corn and yellow peppers. Egg yolks also contain them, along with a healthy dose of fat to help with absorption. The key was to eat these foods regularly so her body could keep a steady supply in her eyes. The next day, Anna went to the market determined to track down these bodyguard foods. She bought a large bunch of spinach, a head of kale, a bag of sweet corn, and a carton of fresh eggs. When she got home, she rearranged her fridge again, putting the greens in clear containers so she'd see them every time she opened the door. She'd learned that out of sight, out of mind was more than just a saying, it was a truth in her kitchen. Her first experiment was a spinach and egg scramble for breakfast. She sautéed the greens gently in olive oil, added whisked eggs, and let the mixture cook slowly until it was soft and fragrant. The first bite made her smile. Better than my old toast and margarine, she thought. For lunch, she tried making a salad with kale, corn, and sliced avocado. She massaged the kale leaves with a little olive oil and lemon juice to soften them, then tossed in the corn for sweetness and the avocado for creaminess. It was colorful, filling, and, as she reminded herself with every bite, exactly what her macula wanted. Within a few weeks, these foods became regular guests at her table. She found herself craving the fresh, clean taste of greens, the sunny burst of sweet corn, the richness of egg yolks. It wasn't a chore anymore, it was a pleasure. And knowing these meals were protecting her vision made them taste even better. One afternoon, her friend Marta came over for tea. Anna served her a frittata made with spinach, corn, and feta cheese. Marta took a bite and raised her eyebrows. "This is delicious. What's in it?" Anna grinned. "A little flavor, a lot of eye protection," Marta laughed. "Only you would cook something for my eyesight," but she finished every bite. When Anna came for her next checkup, she told me she had made lutein and zeaxanthin part of her everyday life. "I feel like I'm feeding my eyes on purpose now," she said, "not just eating whatever happens to be in the kitchen." She even noticed that her vision seemed less strained after spending time reading, though she knew macular degeneration wouldn't reverse overnight. Still, the steadiness of her sight felt like a small, quiet victory. I reminded her that just like carrots work best with a little fat, lutein and zeaxanthin were also fat-soluble. Pairing them with olive oil, avocado, nuts, or egg yolks helped her body absorb them more effectively. She nodded eagerly. She'd already been doing that without realizing it. "So my spinach with olive oil is actually smart cooking?" she asked. "Very smart," I replied. One Saturday morning, as she chopped spinach for an omelet, Anna thought about how different her kitchen looked now. The shelves, once crowded with instant noodles, sugary sauces, and processed snacks, were now filled with fresh vegetables, colorful fruits, and wholesome staples. Cooking felt less like a chore and more like a daily ritual of self-care. That afternoon, she went for a walk by the beach. The sun was bright, the water sparkling. She took a moment to watch the light shimmer across the waves, the way it made the horizon glow. She thought about how precious these moments were and how much she wanted to keep seeing them for as long as possible. For Anna, lutein and zeaxanthin weren't just nutrients, they were part of her promise to herself. Every omelet, every salad, every leafy green was another step in protecting her sight. She knew she couldn't stop time, but she could slow the silent thief that had tried to creep into her life. And that, she thought as she walked home with the salty breeze on her face, was worth every bite. For most of her life, Anna had thought of exercise as something you did for your heart, your weight, or your joints, but never for your eyes. Eyes, she figured, didn't have muscles to tone or stretch, so how could exercise possibly help them? That changed one morning during one of our check-ins. I explained that regular physical activity increases blood flow throughout the body, including to the eyes. This means more oxygen, more nutrients, and a better ability to flush away waste products that can damage delicate eye tissues. Think of it as clearing and refreshing the little rivers that feed your vision, I told her. Anna tilted her head, intrigued. So every time I move my body, I'm actually helping my eyes? I nodded. Exactly. A good walk, some light strength training, even gentle yoga, they all keep the circulation to your eyes healthy. And that helps slow conditions like macular degeneration, glaucoma, and diabetic retinopathy. She leaned back in her chair and gave me a look that was half amused, half thoughtful. I've been avoiding exercise thinking it was just about slimming down, but you're saying it's about keeping my eyes alive. That afternoon, Anna dusted off the comfortable walking shoes she hadn't worn in months. They were still in good condition, a reminder of the walk she used to take along the beach before her vision troubles began. She decided to start small, just 10 minutes around her neighborhood. The first walk felt strange. She was hyper-aware of every step, every crack in the pavement, every passing car. But she also noticed how much lighter her chest felt when she breathed deeply in the cool air. She came home with a faint flush in her cheeks and a surprising sense of accomplishment. I can do this, she thought. Over the next week, she extended her walks little by little. 10 minutes became 15, then 20. She began taking different routes, through quiet side streets, past the park where children played, down to the waterfront where she could hear the waves. She found that the more she walked, the more she wanted to keep going. One afternoon, she passed by her neighbor Peter, who was trimming his hedges. "Haven't seen you out here in a while," he said with a smile. "Looks like you're getting back into it." Anna laughed. "I am. Doctor's orders. For my eyes, believe it or not." Peter raised an eyebrow. "Your eyes?" She nodded, explaining what she'd learned. By the end of the conversation, Peter promised to start walking more too. Within a month, Anna's walks had become a treasured part of her day. She looked forward to them not just for the physical benefits, but for the way they cleared her mind. She noticed that when she walked, her eyes seemed to relax, as if the gentle rhythm of her steps was telling them it was safe to rest. She began adding small bursts of strength exercises, holding light hand weights while standing in her kitchen, doing gentle squats as she waited for the kettle to boil. She even tried a few simple yoga stretches from a video her daughter sent her. She liked how these movements made her feel more grounded in her own body. One morning, after a particularly refreshing walk by the shore, she sat on a bench, watching the sunlight dance across the water. She realized she could see the glint of silver where the waves broke, the faint outlines of seabirds circling in the distance. She couldn't be sure if her vision had improved, but it felt steadier, clearer, more alive. At her next appointment, I asked how her walks were going. She smiled. "I started for my eyes," she said, "but I think they're helping everything. I feel stronger, calmer, and more awake." I told her that was exactly what we wanted. Exercise was never just for one part of the body. It was for the whole system, and when the system was healthy, the eyes benefited too. We also talked about how movement helps regulate blood sugar, reduce blood pressure, and keep weight in a healthy range. All factors that protect the eyes from long-term damage. Anna listened carefully, then said, "So every step I take is like a deposit in my eye health bank account." I nodded. "That's a perfect way to think about it." She began treating her daily walks as a non-negotiable appointment with herself. Even on cooler, windier days, she bundled up and went out. If it was raining, she paced slowly inside her house while listening to her favorite music. She refused to break her streak. One day, her granddaughter joined her for a walk. They held hands as they strolled down the quiet street, pointing out flowers, birds, and little details in shop windows. "Grandma, I like walking with you," the girl said. Anna smiled, feeling a lump in her throat. "Me too, sweetheart. We're helping our eyes together." For Anna, exercise stopped being a chore the moment she connected it to her vision. It wasn't about hitting a certain number on the scale or meeting someone else's fitness standard. It was about keeping the world visible in all its detail and beauty for as long as she could. Now, when she laces up her walking shoes, she thinks of it not as something she has to do, but as something she gets to do. Every step is a quiet act of gratitude for the gift of sight. And with each passing week, she feels more certain that these small daily movements are helping her keep that gift for years to come. Anna had always been a morning person. Even in her years working at the library, she liked to arrive early before the first visitors came in, when the soft golden light streamed through the tall windows and turned the dust motes into little sparks. But she never thought much about sunlight beyond its warmth and beauty. So when I told her that safe exposure to natural light could actually help protect her vision, she was intrigued. I explained that moderate sunlight exposure helps the body produce vitamin D, a nutrient that plays a role in regulating immune function and reducing inflammation, two important factors in keeping the eyes healthy. Some research even suggested that people with higher vitamin D levels had a lower risk of developing certain eye conditions, including macular degeneration. Anna tilted her head, absorbing this new piece of the puzzle. "So sunlight isn't just good for my mood?" she asked. I smiled. "It's good for your eyes too, as long as you get it safely." The key, I told her, was balance. Too much direct sunlight without protection could harm the eyes, increasing the risk of cataracts and other damage from ultraviolet UV rays. But short, regular periods of natural light exposure, especially in the morning or late afternoon, could be beneficial. "Think of it as a gentle daily vitamin for your eyes," I said. Anna decided to make it part of her routine. She started by stepping outside each morning with her cup of tea, standing on her porch for 10 to 15 minutes as the day began. The air was often crisp, and she liked to watch the way the light slowly brightened the street, touching the rooftops before spilling down into the garden. At first, she wore her regular sunglasses, but after we discussed it, she switched to a pair with proper UV protection and a wide-brimmed hat on brighter days. This way, her eyes could benefit from the ambient light without being directly assaulted by the sun's harsh glare. She found that these small morning rituals set the tone for her day. After her tea, she would often take a short walk down the block, letting her eyes take in the range of colors and distances: the green of leaves, the red of a neighbor's flowers, the silver glint on a parked car. It felt like gentle exercise for her vision, a way to remind her eyes of their job beyond the walls of her house. One Sunday morning, her friend Marta joined her. They sat together on the porch steps, chatting as they watched the neighborhood slowly wake up. "You really do this every day?" Marta asked. "Yes," Anna replied. "It's like I'm giving my eyes a little blessing before the day starts." Marta chuckled but nodded, clearly enjoying the calm. Anna noticed that on days she skipped her morning light, maybe because of rain or because she was feeling rushed, she missed it. Not just the quiet moment, but the way it seemed to make her feel more alert and grounded. It was subtle, but real. At her next appointment, I asked how it was going. She told me about her morning porch time, her walks, and how she was paying more attention to the quality of light in her days. I encouraged her to keep it up and to also think about spending a little time outdoors later in the afternoon when the sun was lower. This could help signal to her body that the day was winding down, supporting her sleep cycle. And good sleep was another silent guardian of eye health. Over the next few weeks, she began making a habit of stepping outside around sunset, just for a few minutes. She'd watch the sky shift through its palette of colors, soft gold to rose pink to deepening blue. Sometimes she brought her granddaughter out with her, pointing out the changing shades. "See how the clouds look like they're glowing?" she would say, and the little girl's eyes would widen. For Anna, these moments were more than just habits. They became reminders that caring for her eyes wasn't always about strict rules or medical interventions. Sometimes it was about giving them the natural beauty they were made to enjoy. One evening, standing at her garden gate, she realized something. The fight for her vision had taught her to look more closely, not just at test charts or labels, but at life itself. She was noticing things she used to rush past: the flicker of light through moving leaves, the way shadows stretched long in the late day sun, the soft glint of dew on the grass in the early morning. These were details that required not just eyes, but awareness, and she was determined to hold on to both for as long as she could. The sunlight was no longer just something that marked the passage of her days. It was part of her care plan, as important as her spinach omelets or her daily walks. And as she stepped back inside one golden morning, the light still warm on her face, Anna felt a quiet gratitude for something she had once taken for granted and now saw as a gift. It had been months since Anna first stepped into my clinic, her eyes clouded with worry and her voice heavy with the fear of losing her sight. Back then, she thought vision loss was something that simply happened with age, a slow, unavoidable dimming of the world. Now, as she sat in the same chair, I could see the difference. Her posture was straighter. Her eyes met mine with a calm determination. And most telling of all, her notebook, now well-worn and filled with notes, lay open on her lap. "This," she said, tapping the cover, "is my plan, and I'm sticking to it." She wasn't talking about a quick fix or a miracle cure. She was talking about the small, deliberate choices she had made every single day since we began this journey, swapping her old breakfast for nutrient-rich meals, saying goodbye to sugar and MSG, filling her kitchen with foods that fed her eyes, walking daily, even in the rain, standing in the morning light with her tea, eating spinach, kale, carrots, salmon, and berries like they were as essential as air. Anna had come to understand something powerful, that saving her eyes wasn't about one grand action, but about 1,000 small ones, layered over time. And those small actions were in her control. She told me about a moment from the week before that had stayed with her. She was at the beach with her granddaughter, watching her build a sandcastle. The little girl looked up at her and grinned, her cheeks smudged with sand. Anna realized she could see every detail, the sparkle in her granddaughter's eyes, the tiny grains of sand caught in her lashes, the curve of her smile. "It hit me right then," she said softly. "If I hadn't made these changes, there might have come a day when I couldn't see that clearly anymore. And I don't want to lose that, ever." We talked about how easy it is for people to feel powerless when it comes to their health, to believe that aging is just something that happens to you rather than something you can meet halfway with intention and care. Anna shook her head. "I don't feel powerless anymore," she said. "I feel responsible, like I'm a partner in keeping my eyes working." She admitted it hadn't all been easy. There were days she craved her old biscuits with tea, days when she didn't feel like going for a walk, times she felt awkward reading labels in the grocery store while other shoppers rushed past. But every time she thought about skipping, she remembered that milk carton in the grocery store, the moment her vision blurred so much she couldn't read a simple label. That memory had become her anchor, her reminder of why she was doing this. One evening, she sat down with her daughter and explained everything she had been doing. She told her about the foods, the walks, the sunlight, the quiet discipline of her new life. Her daughter listened carefully, then reached over and squeezed her hand. "Mom," she said, "I'm proud of you. You're teaching me how to grow old with grace and fight for it at the same time." That night, Anna wrote something new in her notebook. "I am not just saving my vision. I am saving the way I want to live." Over the following weeks, she kept refining her habits. She added more variety to her meals, tried new recipes, and even began teaching Marta how to cook without MSG. She set a reminder on her phone for her afternoon walk. She kept a jar of mixed nuts on the counter, a bottle of water by her chair, and a pair of UV protective sunglasses in her bag at all times. She no longer saw these as chores. They were her tools, her armor, her way of saying to the silent thief of vision loss, "Not today, not without a fight." One crisp autumn morning, she came in for her checkup. After the examination, I told her that her condition had remained stable, no further progression since her last visit. She closed her eyes for a moment and exhaled deeply. Then she smiled. "Stable is good," she said. "Stable means I'm buying more time, and time is everything." Before she left, she turned to me with a spark in her eyes. "If you could tell everyone one thing about eye health," she asked, "what would it be?" I thought for a moment. "That you have more power than you think, but you have to start before it's too late." She nodded slowly. "That's what I want people to know too. I wasted years thinking I couldn't change anything. I don't want anyone else to make that mistake." That afternoon, Anna took her granddaughter for another walk by the beach. They collected seashells, watched the gulls, and let the cold foam of the waves brush over their shoes. As the sun dipped lower, Anna took a mental snapshot: the orange sky, the child's laughter, the glistening water. She didn't just look, she absorbed it, because now she knew these moments were more than just beautiful. They were the reason she had taken control. And as they walked home hand in hand, Anna felt certain of one thing: she might not be able to stop the clock, but she could slow it, and she could make every day she still had with clear vision count. When Anna first walked into my clinic, she carried the quiet fear that her world was slipping away, that the faces she loved, the books she cherished, and the colors she adored might one day fade into a blur. She thought vision loss was simply the price of growing older, but her journey taught her otherwise. She began with small changes, replacing her old breakfast with meals that truly fed her eyes, saying goodbye to sugar and MSG, and learning to see the hidden dangers in everyday foods. She embraced the power of carrots, spinach, salmon, blueberries, and eggs, not as trendy superfoods, but as daily protectors of her sight. She discovered that movement was medicine, that sunlight could be a gentle ally, and that every healthy choice was like making a deposit into her vision's bank account. More than the foods she ate or the walks she took, Anna learned the most important truth of all. She was not powerless. Every step, every bite, every moment in the morning light was her way of saying yes to seeing the life she loved for as long as she could. Today, her vision is holding steady, and more importantly, she has reclaimed the joy of truly noticing the world, the sparkle in her granddaughter's eyes, the shifting colors of a sunset, the way light dances on the water. If you take one thing from Anna's story, let it be this: your future is shaped by the choices you make today. Protect your eyes, nourish your body, and guard the beauty of the world you still have the privilege to see. Because every sunrise you can witness with your own eyes is worth fighting for.